Hello and welcome to video lesson number 12. Today we're going to learn about dividing fractions, and this will be our last video lesson for our fractions unit. For this lesson you will need TOC number 12, that's the notes you were given in class, a pencil or pen to take notes, a highlighter, marker, or colored pencil, and this is still part of the non-calculator section. So as big as the numbers are going to get, you cannot use a calculator. So let's get started. At the top of page 12, we're going to review a vocabulary term, and it is called the reciprocal. The reciprocal is just the inverse of a fraction. You're probably saying, what does an inverse mean? Well, if something's inverted, that means it's flipped upside down. So you get the reciprocal of a fraction by flipping the fraction over. So if we look at the example, 1/9 flips upside down and becomes 9/1. So let's practice finding the reciprocal for each of the fractions below. So if it's just a plain old fraction, you're going to flip it over. So 2/5 becomes 5/2. If it's a mixed number, you have to convert it to an improper fraction before you flip it over. So if we look at our example, we have 3 1/4, which means we use that magic C, touch the denominator and go around and touch the numerator. And then you're going to multiply 4 times 3 and add 1. And I would get 13/4. So now that I have my improper fraction, now I can find the reciprocal, which means I just flip it upside down. So it becomes 4/13. And the last example, we have to take, when we have a whole number, we have to put that whole number over 1 and then flip it over. So if we look at our example, 7 becomes 7/1, and then to find the reciprocal, you flip it upside down. So it becomes 1/7. Now that we have practiced finding the reciprocal, you're probably saying, well, why do I need that? Well, the reason why you need it is because dividing fractions is just like multiplying, except it has one extra step. The extra step is flipping one of the fractions upside down, or finding its reciprocal, and then multiplying those fractions. So here's the steps for how to divide. First, you have to convert any mixed numbers to improper fractions. So look at our example. We had 3/4 divided by 1 1/3. We had to make that 1 1/3 an improper fraction. So it becomes 3 times 1 is 3 plus 1 is 4, and it stays over 3. Once we've done that, then we follow these steps. Number 1, keep the first fraction the same. Don't touch it. Second step, switch the sign to multiplication. So instead of division, we're going to change it to multiplication. And our third step is to flip the second fraction to use the reciprocal. So if we looked at our original example, we had 3/4 divided by 4/3. So we had keep the first fraction the same, still 3/4. We go from division to multiplication, and our 4/3 becomes 3/4. And then you just multiply across, just like we've been practicing. So multiply your numerators, 3 times 3, you get 9. Then multiply your denominators, 4 times 4, and you get 16. And then, of course, you simplify. So let's try some together. In the first example, we have 4/7 divided by 2/7. 4/7 stays the same. We're going to change to multiplication and then take our second fraction and flip it upside down. So it becomes 7/2. So then once we're there, you can simplify first. If you notice those two 7s, you could divide those both by 7 and make those 1, or you could just merely multiply across. 4 times 7 is 28, 7 times 2 is 14, and then I would need to simplify. 28 and 14 can both be divided by 14, and I end up with 2 over 1, and we know that any number with a denominator of 1 is just a whole number. So my answer is 2. Looking at number 2, this one's slightly different because I have a whole number in there. So again, the first fraction stays the same, 3/5 stays the same. We're going to switch from division to multiplication and then flip our fraction of 4 over 1 upside down, so it's 1/4. And then when I multiply across, I get 3 over 20. The last example is the one that's really tough because I've got all those mixed numbers in there, and the first step says I have to turn them to improper fractions. So take 2 3/4, multiply 4 times 2 and add 3, and I get 11/4. Take the same thing, 5 2/3, multiply 3 times 5 is 15, plus 2 more is 17, and that stays over 3. So now that I have my just fractions, I can keep the first one the same. It stays 11/4, change to multiplication, and then flip my second fraction upside down, so now it is 3 over 17. And when I multiply across, I get 33 over 68. Remember, no calculators. You got to do that math on your own. Okay, here's a little saying that helps you remember what to do. A fun way to remember it is, don't cry, just flip the second fraction and multiply. Let's say that again. Don't cry, just flip the second fraction and multiply. That's a funny little saying to help you remember the steps for division. So, as you can see, division is merely just multiplication with an extra step because you have to flip that second fraction. But other than that, it's the same thing as multiplying. So, let's do some practice, just a few more. If you want to pause the video and try these on your own, this part's pretty easy. You're just finding the reciprocal. All right, if you pause the video, welcome back. If not, let's just keep going. Number 1, we have 11 over 5. The reciprocal is the flip, so we got to flip them upside down. So the answer is 5 over 11. For number 2, first I have to put 9 over 1 and then flip it upside down, and I get 1 over 9. For number 3, 3/4 becomes 4/3. For number 4, we have to first convert it to an improper fraction. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 1 is 11 over 5. And then now I can find the reciprocal by flipping it upside down to get 5/11. Now, be careful in these mixed numbers that you don't find the improper fraction and stop, because it's an easy thing to do with having these multiple step problems. For number 5, again, we have to use our magic C. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 2 makes 11/3. And then we're going to flip it upside down and get 3 over 11. Hopefully by now you've gotten this really good. For number 6, it's a whole number. Put it over 1. And then when we flip it upside down, we get 1 over 22. All right, the last little bit is practice. The first one's easy. It's just fractions. So we have 5/8 stays the same. We're going to change to multiplication and flip that second fraction. Remember, don't cry. Just flip the second fraction and multiply. Once I do that, I can simplify first or just multiply across. 5 times 4 is 20, and 8 times 3 is 24. And once I get there, I need to simplify. I can divide both of those by 4, and I end up with 5/6. Number 2, again, is straight fractions, so let's practice. Keep the first fraction the same, 2/3. change to multiplication, and flip that second fraction over. So I get 2/3 times 7/3. Multiply straight across, and you get 14/9. Oh, I've got an improper fraction. Gotta change it back to a mixed number using division. Divide 14 by 9, and you end up with 1 5/9. For number 3, you have to make 10 a fraction by putting it over 1. Now I can do the keep, switch, flip method, or don't cry, just flip the second fraction and multiply, however you want to remember it. 10 over 1 times 5 over 1. And when I do that, notice you got 1 on the bottom, so your answer is going to be a whole number. 10 times 5 is 50 over 1, which simplifies to just 50. Number 4, we have 3/5 divided by 4. I need to make that 4 a fraction by putting it over 1. Now I can keep the first fraction the same, change to multiplication, and flip 4 over 1 to 1/4 and multiply across. 3 times 1 is 3. 5 times 4 is 20, and I cannot simplify, so that is my final answer. And so these get a little tougher because we're throwing those mixed numbers in there. 4 and 1/4 is going to become 17/4, and 3 and 1/8 becomes 25/8. Now that I have them in fraction form, I can do keep, switch, flip, or don't cry, just flip the second fraction and multiply. So 17/4 stays the same, change to multiplication, and then it becomes 8 over 25. These are bigger numbers, which I know are not pretty, so if you don't want to multiply 17 times 8, you can simplify that 4 and 8 by dividing by 4, and then you'd only have to multiply 17 times 2. If not, you just multiply across, and you're going to get 136 over 100, and if you do that division, you end up with 1. Oh, sorry, I'm going to divide these both by 4 first. And I get 34 over 25. Now I can do my division, and I end up with 1 9/25. So those are some different ways you can simplify those first. Then number 6, we have 6 1/3 divided by 2. Since I have a mixed number and a whole number, I need to convert them so I can do my problem. 6 1/3 becomes 19/3, and 2 gets put over 1. Remember, this first fraction is going to stay the same, stays 19/3. We're going to change to multiplication and then flip that 2 over 1 to 1/2. And then I can multiply straight across, and I will get 19 over 6. And I have to use division to change that back into a mixed number, and I end up with 3 1/6. All right, 7 and 8, we have 22 divided by 3 1/8. Again, if you ever want to pause the video and try these on your own and check your answers, that's fine. 22 gets put over 1, and 3 1/8 gets changed to an improper fraction of 25 over 8. And then I'm going to keep 22 over 1, multiply, and then 8 over 25 is the flip or the reciprocal of the original fraction. And then I'm going to multiply straight across, and I get 176 over 25. And if you think of money, think $1.75 in quarters. How many quarters go into $1.75? And that helps you find your answer. It would be 7 1/25. Kind of jumped ahead for the next one. 2 1/8 becomes 17/8. Keep the first fraction the same, multiply, and then flip your second fraction. And when you multiply, you get 8 over 68. And I can divide both of those by 4. And when I do that, I get 2 over 17. And now it's time for you to show what you have learned today. So log in, do the homework quiz, and show us all that you have learned.